Hello and welcome to today's episode of Ask an Expert with Claire. Today we have Reed Allen with us. Reed, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Great, I am too. For those of you who don't know, Reed Allen is a licensed professional counselor at Next Step Counseling in Chicago. She has a master's education degree in community counseling. She utilizes strength-based perspectives with interventions from trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and trauma-informed care. Her specializations include depression, including Major Depressive Disorder, Seasonal Affective Disorder, and Dysthymia, as well as anxiety, including Generalized Anxiety Disorder, Social Anxiety Disorder, Panic Disorder, specific phobias, post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as grief and loss, including bereavement with an immediate family member, loss of a loved one to substance dependence, breakup and divorce recovery, trauma, and life transitions. So you're like a go-to for a lot of things.
Like, that sounds so impressive, but I'm like, do I do all that? I don't know. No, yeah.
Time just, you don't know how impressive you are. And then you hear all of your whole life's achievements. You're like, wow, I have dedicated years and years of my life to these areas of study. So with everything going on right now with the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm sure you're seeing a wide variety of issues and responses with a steep increase in mental health issues, particularly with those on the front lines. I wanted to talk a bit today about common problems you're helping clients with right now and areas in which they're struggling.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is such an interesting time in history because we're experiencing what we call like a collective trauma. And that's like kind of how we're having to like experience it, like process it, and like heal from it all at the same time. And that's like really hard because like the COVID-19 narrative is constantly changing. And so we're constantly having to like adjust and like adapt to like the new information that we get every single day. And that can be really hard for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with different industries being affected at different times and to different degrees of severity, as well as, individuals' own coping mechanisms too. I mean, there's a wide variety of depths I'm sure that people can, plummet and rise to depending on the situation or the day.
Oh, for sure. And I think that there's such like exactly what you were saying, like there's like this loss of like, of course, like the lives being lost to COVID-19, but also like our own personal losses, whether that be like loss of everyday life, loss of coping mechanisms, loss of connection, loss of like mobility, being able to move, and all these things that we normally like rely on to live our everyday lives.
Outside time, at least with, me in a city too, it's like your ability to get outside if you have to go through an elevator and everything like that, I think is a little diminished too, which can get to you at times.
Oh yeah, definitely. You're kind of like, oh, I have to go through like a whole thing now.
Yeah. So just to follow up on that, when clients are feeling stuck, because I feel like a lot of people just feel this stagnation or panic or just feeling, for lack of a better term, when clients are feeling stuck, you utilize acceptance and commitment therapy in order to regain a lost sense of control, increase mindfulness, and create and build on one's life values. So what are some things people can do for themselves in order to regain that lost sense of control?
Oh, like that's a great question. And I think there's like a bunch of articles right now really stressing the importance of like routines. Like I feel like routines are like routines. We're going to get through this with routines. And I'm like, yeah, for sure. And yeah, and also I kind of tell my clients a lot of times, like, this is very much like your information gathering stage, that like we're constantly learning about ourselves, we're constantly gathering information, and that one day you might wake up and you have a routine and you do it perfectly and you knock 10 things off your productivity list, and that's an awesome day. And the next day you might wake up and you woke up and you went to work, and that's an awesome day too. So kind of like, I really stress the importance of routines, but also giving yourself that self-compassion that like this is going to ebb and flow. You're going to have really stuck days and you're going to have really awesome days, and both are okay and valuable, and it's okay to feel both of those.
I feel like this, and I think that's absolutely true for me too, right? Like some days if I get up and I do yoga and I meditate and I read and then I get set up for my day, I feel so much better. And some mornings I don't have that. Like my schedule is a lot of times at the mercy of other people. So if whatever time they can meet, I can meet, and sometimes I don't have that. Or sometimes I just kind of wake up on the wrong side of the bed and it doesn't happen. And I feel like this pandemic is making everyone be extremely present. And I feel like especially in 2020 America, everybody's working, everybody's throwing themselves into, being competitive, being the best, getting to the next thing, getting to the next thing. And this is really focusing everybody and making them slow down and look at like, how do you feel in this moment? And it's okay if some days aren't the absolute best, because they can't be.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that also this idea of like productivity and like perfectionism is what I'm seeing like a lot of. Like we're a very high functioning society where we're like, how can I be my best self? How can I quarantine best? Like, how can I be amazing in this time and all this kind of stuff? And it's like, we're just trying to like survive this. So exactly what you said, like, can I check back in with myself and say like, do I have like realistic expectations of myself? And can I give myself that kindness like day to day?
Mm-hmm. Hugely important. So thank you for that message.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think a big step to take is personally looking at yourself too during this time. We're allotted the time to do so. So taking a look at yourself truthfully and evaluating where are you at, and not in a way that's harsh towards yourself, because a lot of us aren't exactly where we want to be now, but with a tone and perspective of helping yourself and continuing to improve with that sort of an attitude. I know you utilize cognitive behavioral therapy to help clients through thoroughly processing their self-image and self-talk, with the objective to increase positive ways to think about themselves and the world around them, which I think is vitally important right now for everyone and anybody watching and listening. So what are some ways to successfully implement this or remind yourself of this from home on a daily basis?
Yeah. I think that that's like key right now. And I think it's Lori Gottlieb, who wrote the book Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, I think did an amazing job of explaining this in a really, really just beautiful way. And she kind of explained it as like, what is the narrative that you're like telling yourself right now? And like, she's like, who is the person that you talk to the most throughout your life? And some people are like, my partner, like my mom or my best friend. It's like the person that you talk the most to through yourself is like yourself, like, which is like, so like, we never even think of that. And I think that's such an important thing, especially in quarantine, because it's like, you're going to have some level of anxiety. Like that's productive anxiety. Like, are we washing our hands? Are we like following protocol? Are we doing all these things? And then we kind of start to move into like unproductive anxiety. And then it's like kind of like when we begin to like ruminate and really kind of go down this kind of spiral. Yes, exactly. And you're like, when is this going to end? I can't handle this, that sort of thing. And so being able to like check yourself of being like, am I feeling like I really believe in like somatic symptoms. So are things coming up for me that I need to like check in with myself and kind of go back to these more productive level of anxiety and kind of those kind of thoughts. So yeah, like checking in with yourself of being like, how have I been talking to myself lately? Or kind of like, where am I feeling this guilt from or shame or, am I allowing myself to feel sad and lost and all these other kind of things of just giving yourself some room during this time.
That's super helpful. Thank you for that. I think also I wanted to touch on briefly grounding techniques. So I know if people, when they're on the really far end of, I'm almost, having a panic attack or something like that, what are some grounding techniques in terms of like getting into your own body or planting yourself in your physical surroundings that can help you gain control in like an extreme situation like that?
That's a great question. I think a lot of the things that I like to say is like really bringing in your body, because when we're feeling like panic, we're no longer in control of like our mind and our body. Like it's very much like a loss of control. So it's like, how do I bring myself back to myself, basically? So like I a lot of times bring in like your senses. Like I know we've all heard of like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like what are 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can taste, and 1 thing you can touch, and like bringing yourself really into this moment. I mean, scent, like your scent is the only thing connected to memory. And so I very much like believe in like, what are something that like you can smell that will make you like be present? Like, is that a cup of coffee? Is that peppermint? Is it your favorite perfume? And like trying to like just sit in that and just smell it and feel calm and like okay with yourself. So I think I like just utilize a lot of like body work in order to like bring yourself down, and a lot of breath work. So whatever that can look like.
Always important breath work. And that's a good idea too. That just made me think about, with scent being the strongest sense tied to memory, that would be a good gift, I think, to give people, because we're so detached at this point in time, but you can still send something. And like a conversation starter, if you're looking to connect with someone, or even like your parents or people who you've known your whole life, you know, what is their favorite scent? What's a scent that brings them calm? What's one that reminds them of their childhood? And maybe find something like that, source it on the internet and send them. I think that would be a really sweet little gift. Just a sidebar that just popped into my head.
I think that's like so beautiful, because it's kind of like you feel like a little bit of them and that connection with them, especially when we're such at a lack of that right now. So I think that would be like a perfect gift.
Yeah. Thanks. That just popped into my head. I was like, hey, if you're watching, that's a great idea to, you know, if you're looking for new ways to connect with people aside from Zoom, that might be one. Cool.
Yeah.
So on that note, in terms of healthy coping mechanisms, just in general, like during the pandemic, and then general healthy coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
What
This is an amazing question. So I think some healthy coping mechanisms that I think this is a hard question, because I very much come from like the thought pattern of like, you know yourself best. So if like, I'm sure that anything that I would come up with, you've already come up with, you know what I mean? And like worked through and kind of, you know, felt or whatever that looks like. But I think just kind of going back to like this idea of like, so we're going through this collective trauma, right? And so this idea that, you know, we have nothing to look forward to, like this predictability piece. Like, you know, we don't have like travel or concerts or like Chicago summers, you know, we don't have any of that. So really having things you can look forward to over the weekend. Like, I'm going to talk with my grandma and have a cup of tea, and that's something I can look forward to on Saturday or whatever that looks like. It's a collective trauma because of like the immobility. Like, we can't move how we normally move throughout our lives. We don't walk to the L. We don't go have lunch with our friends. So are we still like moving our bodies? Are we still like stretching and doing yoga and like getting in our steps and all of these kind of things that are so key to like, you know, making sure we're, you know, really thinking about ourselves during this time. Another piece is like, I'm hearing a lot of like space and time is getting merged together. Like, what day is it? You know, was that yesterday or 3 weeks ago? You know, all this idea. Or yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know what's going on. So I think a lot of times we're like numbing. So like, you know, you're going through like a bunch of different tabs on your computer instead of like focusing on one thing. Like, can we really be intentional about like how we're using our time? And if we're feeling a little bit numbing, we're feeling a little bit like we're disconnected, can we like really connect and be mindful in these moments? Which would be like having a cup of coffee and like really thinking about how the coffee smells and like holding the mug. Is it hot? You know, what comes up for you? All these kind of things that are kind of like the antidote to numbing. This sense of like loss of connection, which is a kind of a part of this like trauma of like, you know, we don't talk with our coworker, you know, we're not talking with our friend that we normally take the L with or any of these things. So we're like setting intentional time to like check in with our friends and our family members and ourselves. Are we like doing that too much? Like, are we having way too many Zooms? And we need to like pull back on that as well, which I feel like is, you know, some people feel guilty about, but is like a real thing. So I just feel like what I'm ramping up to is like boundaries of like with ourselves. I think especially with work, I'm hearing a lot of like, I was working till 2 a.m. or I was working till 12:30. And, you know, can you really, really recognize that boundary setting is really important, that you're not just working from home, you're working from home during a pandemic, you know? And so you still need to set boundaries with yourself and your employer. Can you have those discussions? I just answered a lot. So I apologize. I just keep going with these coping mechanisms.
That's a big question in general. I think that those are really helpful tips to remain grounded, to remain mindful, to bring yourself back to the present moment, to be aware of boundaries and to actually adhere to them. That is something that I'm actively working on in my lifetime, you know, currently right now. Where is that line? And then if a block schedule works for you, like block out time where you're, you know what I mean? Just figure out a routine that works best for you. But in terms of healthy coping mechanisms, I think leading up to boundaries is a really solid way to encompass all of those.
because I feel like I could just answer boundaries for each of these questions, but I think it's just a lot of the work we do in counseling, and I think it's hard because of what I would normally spend maybe like 6 weeks doing with a client, like coming in every single week. They're having to tackle like IRL, like in the present moment, in the here and now, in this pandemic, which is really, really a really tough place to be. So my heart goes out to people, trying to set these boundaries that haven't been established before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think again, easier and more difficult for some versus others, just based on your own individual bandwidth, and then based on the job you have too. Anybody on the front lines, it's going to be really difficult for them to draw boundaries, because it's like you're there 24/7 and it is a pandemic, so everything is all the time, and then you go home and it's the news, or it's just I imagine that would be really tough to turn it off.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine that. Because, like, how do you tell a doctor you really need to set some boundaries? You know what I mean? Like, what does that look like for them? And is it especially important for them? Like, going home and being like, I can't look at social media, and I really need to work out and prioritize like myself and all these kind of things.
Yeah, move my body, tune away from the news, or limit yourself, one or two check-ins a day, and then keep it moving on.
Mm-hmm.
Positive focus for yourself.
Yeah.
On that note, let's talk about some common but unhealthy coping mechanisms that we might be seeing spiking perhaps right now.
Yeah. I think this is a really hard time for people because this is such a trigger. So I really want to normalize that old patterns of behavior and old patterns of thinking are very normal to come up right now. So I run a group, and some people are saying like, I'm smoking again, or like I'm eating a lot, I'm drinking more than I normally would. And this is all like normalized behavior because it's like old patterns of thinking and behaving. So our mind and our body immediately go back to being like, remember when I did this? That felt good. So I want to normalize that, and at the same time, check in with yourself and be like, I know it works for me, I know it doesn't. So yeah, I think that a lot of, times defense mechanisms and old patterns of coping are really intimate to us. They're a hugely intimate relationship. So I'm seeing a lot of, numbing behavior, a lot of like irritability, and maybe some fatigue and shutting down. So really trying to give yourself that self-compassion to be like, it's okay that I, behaved this way or have some of these like unhelpful coping mechanisms, but like, what can I do to change that tomorrow? Or how can I, change that a little bit, in the weeks to come? So I guess that would be my question for that, or answer for that.
No, and I think that that's helpful too. And if people have a hard time, I think some people are exceptionally hard on themselves too. So it's hard. I mean, finding self-compassion can sometimes be really tough for people. And something that I found that's helpful is, how would you speak to your sibling or a parent or your best friend who is going through a difficult time? You wouldn't be as harsh to them as you're probably being to yourself. So sometimes it's almost like you have to take yourself outside of the situation and look at like, okay, what would I say to myself if I was looking for a friend, and really being a friend to yourself during those times too.
Oh, yes. I literally do that intervention every single time of like, what would you say to your friend going through this experience? And people would be like, it's okay, and you made a mistake, and you're just a human being. And it's like, how do we like do that for ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I feel like another thing is like this feeling of like guilt, I think, is coming up for a lot of people. It's like guilt that I still have a job, guilt that I don't have a job, guilt that I'm feeling joy, guilt that I'm feeling sadness. And I feel like an overarching theme is like guilt and shame a lot in this. So I definitely feel like, how can I, I'm feeling upset, and then I'm feeling guilty about feeling upset. How do you like pull back and be like, all these feelings are okay, and it's okay that we're not okay right now? So another little
It's okay to not be okay. I like that. That's a good takeaway. You can at least just repeat to yourself. Or at least check yourself if you're going through any of this.
Yeah.
Really quick, I wanted to touch on couples and strains on relationships. I know you do a lot of work with attachment style. And if anybody's looking and you're curious what your attachment style is, I think it is incredibly informative in terms of how you relate to the whole world, work, personal, everything. I'll link, Next Step Counseling does have a link to the attachment style quiz, and I'll put that below here, but in terms of couples and strains on relationships right now, what are some things that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think it's a really hard time to be in a relationship in quarantine. I think that, what comes up for people is like we wouldn't normally be spending this much time together. Like we wouldn't be quarantined in, our house for 2 months. So just like number one, normalizing that like if you guys are a little bit more irritable with each other or like, on each other's nerves, that's normal. Like you'd be going to work, you'd be socializing, you'd be, doing your hobbies, hanging out with your you wouldn't be spending this much time together. So anything that, I think any like narrative surrounding like we should be being more intimate or we should be really like our best selves right now is really not realistic. Like, we're both experiencing things separately and then as a collective. So something that I've been really trying to like emphasize is like check-ins with each other. Like, how are we doing? What can we improve upon? What do we do good this week? What can we improve upon for the next week? And then really asking yourselves, like, how can my partner support me during this time? And, really checking in with your needs and saying, like, can they help me? Like, would it be awesome if they made dinner this night? Or, do I need a hug? Like being able to like really identify your needs and do that for your partner. So just, I think check-ins are awesome during this time.
Absolutely. And I think, I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about the 5 love languages because I think that those are also super helpful. So if you haven't checked out yours, you should, because I think it's helpful to understand how you best like to receive and give love. And oftentimes most people's partners, they're not the same. So some things that you could be trying to do that are really loving and kind in your own mind aren't really resonating to the full extent with them, and vice versa. That could be happening. And I think more time together is probably just magnifying a lot of those, potential incompatibilities, or if you've, already worked that out, good for you.
No, I think you're completely right. Like a lot of times we're like, I like quality time. Why doesn't he or she or them like quality time? And it's like, we all don't have the same love languages. So how can we like act in service of our partners during this time? That was a great point. I love that. Love languages, Brad.
just add it in there. And 2, in terms of, on that note, healthy communication with one another. I think, like you're saying, added stress, right? Our entire normal routines are disrupted. People who have children are now having to become homeschoolers and spend 24/7 with their entire family unit too. That's not a lot of reprieve. It's not a lot of rest for yourself as an individual. So I guess healthy ways to communicate those needs to others, be it your partner or your children, if you have them. Do you have any tips in that arena?
Yeah, I think it's very much like you just described, like when you're on the plane, like how can I put on my mask before I help others kind of thing. But I think that's a great question because, I think a lot of times I have clients say like, how do I explain this to like my child or my like teenager of like what's kind of going on? And I think it's a hard question because I think as parent, I'm not a parent, but like as a parent, my parents have been like, how can I help you? How can we fix this? Like, it's going to be okay. And like, I think that we need to shift that a little bit to be like, I'm struggling too. Like, this sucks too. Like, I can't imagine what that's like for you. Like, what do you think would help? How can I help you? Instead of being like, it's going to be okay. Like, we're going to see them soon. It's like, how can we just like validate their experiences and like sit in it with them for a little bit? I don't know if that answered your question.
That's a good point. I think I was speaking more like if you're thinking about snapping, like I need some space, but you don't want to be like, hey, child, I don't want this to come off like I don't love you, but in this moment I'm really frustrated. Like, what are some healthy ways to communicate that? But I think that you make a really good point, knowing that you're not alone, and that it's not just, oh, put on a brave face and this is going to be fine and we're going to get through it. It's okay that you're feeling frustrated by things. It's okay that you're sad that you're missing time with your friends. So am I. I'm here with you in this as well. Do you have any ideas? Let's talk it out and see. And I think that it's also helpful just to talk to other people because that's always another perspective that you don't have, inside of your own mind. So it's always helpful, even if it's a kid, to just bounce ideas off each other and say, oh, this is what I'm feeling. How are you feeling?
Yeah. But back to your original question, like I think that you exactly said the right thing. Like, hey, I need to take a moment and I need to like go into the bedroom, or I need to do like a walk around the block, or like I think what's coming up for a lot of people, and I've been seeing this a lot in like like newspapers is like, I can't like hold my sister's anxiety anymore. I can't hold my mom's anxiety anymore. I can't hold my partner's anxiety anymore because this is really hard. And maybe I would be able to do it for 15 minutes every other day, but this is like constant. And I think it's really about being really transparent about people of like, this is horrible. This sucks. I'm in this with you. I just can't talk about this right now. Give me until tonight. Give me till tomorrow. I need to take a moment, and really, really being transparent with them about like your own boundaries and communication patterns and what you need right now.
And I'm sure that that's more difficult for certain like personality types or people with specific backgrounds than others too. If you're aimed to be more of a people pleaser and you're used to saying yes to things, even if you want to say no, like you're disrespecting yourself, but you still just want everything to be copacetic. And kids are divorced, find that oftentimes they're in those kind of positions and situations, but you'll get to a point, and especially now under these circumstances where it's like, you'll explode or implode. So you got to start drawing those lines and saying, this is what I'm capable of in this moment. This is what I'm not capable of right now. And I think that people in your life who truly care about you and understand who you are will be supportive of that. They get it.
Definitely. And I think that with any boundary setting, there's always going to be pushback. And then, it's this idea of like, who is pushing back? And that's really about them instead of yourself in those moments. So I think you're right. The people that can accept that are the people that are, truly love and care about you.
Absolutely. Well, any other things that you're seeing routinely come up right now, or common questions, common problems, common anything else that's cropping up on your end?
We covered a lot.
Yeah, we did.
I think that I think that the only other thing I can think of is this idea. I think I'm hearing it a lot of times described as like survivor's guilt. It's not exactly survivor's guilt, but it's like this idea of like 98% of my team got cut and I'm still here, and there's this huge guilt of like with furloughs and layoffs and all this kind of thing of it's okay to feel grief and gratitude, and how do we hold both during this time that I'm so grateful I still have this job, I'm so grateful for my life, but I also I'm grieving these people and I feel sad for these people. So the both and of that as well, I think, is really important to
just recognize each as they come in and recognize them and feel them as you're feeling them.
Yeah, that you don't have to just feel grateful, you don't have to just feel grief, that you can feel them both together, in this moment.
That's lovely. I like that message a lot
Too.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that myself, during this time too. I still have a job. I'm really grateful that I do. My company's gone through, having to furlough people, as have hundreds of others right now. So I think that it is important to say that you can hold both at the same time. I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard it the other day and I'm like, oh, I'm going to steal that. That's just like such a beautiful concept, because I feel like so much we feel like we have to be like so singular in our thinking, but can we hold space for both, during this time?
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Reed. I appreciate you taking the time to be with me today. And I'm sure everybody who's been watching is very appreciative as well. We covered a lot of topics and a lot of healthy coping mechanisms during this really difficult time. If anybody has any additional questions or concerns, I know that they can contact you. What's the best way to do that?
You can always make an appointment with me or anyone a part of my practice at nextstepcounselingchicago.com. I am taking on new clients at this time, so yeah, reach out. We would love to have you.
Well, you've got my support there, so I can tell you from personal recommendation, she's great. So go check that out.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.